Oh, let America be America again, the land that has never been, and yet must be the land where every man is free. Langston Hughes. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to Above the Noise Talk Show, where our attitude and perspectives shape our reality. I'm Ms. Angie, your co-host and your moderator, along with my partner in crime, Rawle. I am. How you doing, Rawle?
I am well today. I'm above ground, so I'm good.
That's great. I'm glad to see that you're parting ways with your cold. Y'all not friends anymore.
Well, we're still kind of buddies. I'm trying for a quick divorce, but it's kind of hanging on. So
We're gonna have to get rid of that.
yeah,
Would you give us the rules of engagement, please? You have the mic.
definitely. Okay, just so for the panelists to understand how we're going to operate, rules of engagement are very simple. First one is to respect each other's viewpoints, respect the time allotted, no over talking or continuous talking. Each panelist will provide an answer to questions, and sometimes Miss Angie may just ask one of you, but either way, uh, you will all have a say in what's coming to pass. A panelist who wants to push back on a point, please raise your Zoom hand. And then to interject during someone else's time, again, raise your Zoom hand, and you will either be accepted or declined. So it's very simple. It's a way of keeping the conversation flowing, but as well as trying to respect us in conversations. We do interject at times. So being that it's electronically, I invite you to use your Zoom hand, and that's it. And the last point is let's have fun and enjoy our time together. Back to you, Miss Angie. Angie, you're muted.
We're good. I'm sorry. Please feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat. I'll present them to the panel. If you have a specific person that you would like to answer that question, please include it in the chat. Please allow me to introduce our outstanding panel. Will you all raise your hand so everybody knows who you are when I introduce you? We're going to start with you, Miss Chyrel J. Jackson. She is a number one ranked best-selling Amazon author and literary supernova. She's reared and raised in the South suburb outside of Chicago. She's African American literary influencer. Her writing She is an African American literary influence her writing and is one of her favorite genres. Cheryl writes in the spirit of her past great literary ancestors. Eddy Foreman, aka Ed Potastic, has been writing poetry for 8 years and is a Washington, D.C. native. He is a regular in several open mic events. His motto is I write and speak poetry through and through to inspire people like you. Mr. Brian Donnell James is a renowned author as well as the 2024 winner of the California, I'm sorry, I like California, sorry about that. Carolina, Carolina Literary Prize for Poetry and the Langston Hughes Poetry Award. He has won several other poetry awards. He has received several honors and sits on several boards. He is the finalist for America's Next Great Author, a TV pilot. He says he writes in part because poetry connects the human spirit. It unites us all. Please give our panelists a hand. While will you give us a synopsis of the series and tonight's show, please? You have the mic. Wow, you're playing me now. You're muted. You're doing me.
I can't believe I did that.
I must be
We
confused.
need
I'm
an
sorry.
automatic unmuter. So, anyway, just to give you an outline of the show. So, the series Black Like Me, Life in the Diaspora, is a 4-part series. Tonight, we're doing the second part. And tonight, the second episode of this 4-part series, we're going to look at life after civil rights, the pros and cons. In the first episode, we looked at Black consciousness. What does it mean today? In the third of the series, which will air on Monday, December 30th, it's Jordans versus books. What's limiting today's Blacks? And in the last of the series, Black Excellence, which will air on Wednesday, January 29th. What does being a sellout Uncle Tom white-minded mean? And this is just a series designed to help us as Black Americans, in my case, Black Canadians, just to look at where life is and where we are. It's not a condemnation of anything. It's just an open, honest conversation in regards to where we think we as a people are. So back to you, Miss Anjie.
Thank you, Rawle. Now I will give you a civil rights timeline. Civil rights are an essential component of democracy. They guarantee equal social opportunities and protection under the law, regardless of race, religion, or other characteristics. It guarantees the right to vote, to a fair trial, to government services, and to a public education. The Civil Rights Acts passed between 1861 and 1991 represent key legal milestones in the U.S. towards establishing equality and protecting civil rights, particularly for African Americans and other minority groups. Here are a summary of the major acts. There were a lot of different acts. These are just the major ones. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 was the very first federal law to define citizenship and affirm that all citizens are equally protected by the law. The Civil Rights Act of 1871, sometimes called the Ku Klux Klan Act. This act, also called the Enforcement Act, empowers the federal government to act against the Ku Klux Klan and other groups that use violence or intimidation to prevent African Americans from experiencing their rights. The Civil Rights Act of 1875. This law aimed to prohibit racial discrimination in public accommodations like hotels, theaters, and public transportation. It was struck down by the Supreme Court in 1883, which ruled that Congress lacked authority to regulate private discrimination. Civil Rights Act of 1957, it established the Civil Rights Division within the Department of Justice and the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, aimed at protecting voting rights for African Americans. The Civil Rights Act of 1960, building on the 1957 Act, this law strengthened protections against voting discrimination and allowed federal courts to inspect local voter registration records. It also made obstructing a court-ordered desegregation a federal offense. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin in employment, education, and public accommodations. It also strengthened enforcement of voting rights and desegregation and created the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, also known as the EEOC. Voting Rights Acts of 1965. Although not labeled as a Civil Rights Act, it aimed to overcome legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevented African Americans from experiencing their right to vote, outlawing literacy tests, and providing federal oversight in areas with a history of discriminatory practices. The Civil Rights Act of 1960 Act, also known as the Fair Housing Act. This act extended protections against discrimination in housing. It prohibited housing discrimination based on race, color, religion, and national origin. Later amendments added protection for gender, disability, and family status. The Equal Employment Opportunity Act of 1972, an amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it gives the EEOC greater authority to enforce laws against workforce discrimination, extending its reach to state and local governments. The Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987 overturned a 1984 Supreme Court decision and expanded the scope of civil rights protection in any program or activity receiving federal funding. The final act is the Civil Rights Act of 1997. This act strengthened laws against workforce discrimination. Panellist, civil rights today. Although we're at a crossroads now for opportunities, what are the great inequalities still plaguing our school system? To my guests, please feel free to put any question comments in the chat. I'll present them to the panel. If you have a specific person you would like to answer your question, please place it in the chat also. To reiterate the question, panelists, although we're at the crossroads now for opportunities, what are some of the great inequalities still plaguing our school system? You have up to 3 minutes with each response. Chyrel, will you start the dialogue, please? Brian, you're next.
I knew you were going to start with me. I just knew it. I was hoping maybe not, but
Ladies first, girl. Ladies first.
oh my God. What do I think in terms of education?
Think about the school systems today. What are you looking at in your African American, any of your minority school systems that are causing them to not be being trained as well as they could be?
For me, personally speaking, I think the poverty gap that plagues specifically our people is the needle hasn't moved that much. And we have all these great opportunities. I'm not saying that, but for me, recognizing that some of our families aren't able to have computers in them. So you have that gap. And you just have, it's the economic divide in comparison to, I think, what people outside of non-Black families experience. I think that from what I've seen, that's a big factor. So that's how I would answer that.
So you're saying the poverty level is what you think is causing the school system?
I think that is a factor. I don't think that's the only factor. But I do see a gap in I have a lot of friends which are school teachers, and we've talked about this all the time. some of the children, some of the households, they don't have, let alone the kids having a cell phone, they don't have computers. So they aren't able to keep pace with some of the schoolwork because computers are needed. If you don't have that in your house and the only access you have to a computer is in the library outside of the home, you're not gonna, you can't keep up. And so I think sometimes poverty um, is a big handicap for Black children in terms of education.
Okay. Brian?
Yes, I would also echo that, especially in terms of educational funding per state. I'm from the South, and there's definitely a discrepancy in terms of funding when applied to so quote African American areas or low poverty areas for Black and Brown children than there are in other areas. Um, so I would echo that. Also, I think to take some responsibility, I think it's upon us as well. Because children, we teach our children since they're born that they should look outside themselves for blessings or look outside of themselves to for favorable things. But we need to start educating them and teaching them the divinity within them. Let them know that they have the power to do things, so it's also a mentality and a spiritual thing as well. Um, and I really think that those would be my 2 points that I could think of at this time. Educational system funding, especially in the South, and our own responsibility to educate our children so that they have the proper mentality and spirituality reserve to endure.
I agree totally. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. You can't get too much more southern than that. And I agree. The system is underfunded. And I agree that it's upon the parents and the grandparents to help make it better. Um, Unfortunately, most of our parents now are children raising children. So that could kind of hinder us a little bit too. Eddy, I know you have some words of wisdom for me.
Well, our wonderful guest already have more positive, or more actually, sorry, our guest actually said my answers, so very great job. It's um it's funding, and it's the parents not being in the kids' lives. And also it could be the status quo, you know? Sometimes when you're a kid, you're trying to always chase the next thing, trying to get popularity, trying to get favoritism for your own, for outside influences, but not yourself. There's many different factors, but I think the three should be funding, parents, and just a kid. When we were kids, we were all over the place. We're just trying to find ourselves, and some actually have guidance and some didn't, but we had to learn the hard way. So yeah.
I agree. Well, do you have any comments?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And I nodded my head a number of things that were said, but there are some things that I don't necessarily agree with. Because funding is a very big issue, but it's also not a singular issue. And then when we lump everything into one basket, it at times can look very dispiriting, but it's not. So for me, education is key. Booker T. Washington, when he, his first thing he did after not being a slave anymore is run to an education. So that's how important he deemed it to be. I find it interesting because I do live in Canada, but I went to school in the States, in New York. And I went through the public school system. And the education that I received, I think, is superior to what kids are getting today. And then I listened to someone like Thomas Sowell, who grew up in the 40s, went to school in the 50s, and he talks about his education, how what he got is far superior to what's being done today. I find it interesting that Black Americans from the 1900s till about the 1960s still very much having to live in, and as much as Anjie outlined, I loved the fact she gave you the timeline of civil rights. But before the main Civil Rights Act came about, when I say main, the one that everyone recognizes, what happened in '64, Blacks were striving and moving up. Poverty rate from 1900 to say 1940, the poverty rate, and particularly for Black Americans, had dropped some 40%. From 1940 to 1960, it dropped another 20%. And then from the 1960 to 70, it dropped another 18%. A lot of people want to attribute that to the Civil Rights Act, but it was just a continuation of processes that had already started long ago. And then all of a sudden in the 70s, it started, poverty started to rise again. Education started to slip, crime started to slip. I found it interesting. Previous to the Civil Rights Act, crime was going down. Race relations between Black and white were actually on the rise. And this, again, was while we were still in the throes of Jim Crow segregation. I think when it comes to education, we need to look at the system. We have many factors that are inhibiting education of not just Blacks, but of Americans altogether. But since we're talking about Black Americans, because when you look at Black Americans, we always kind of look at the ones in poverty and kind of blanket that's all Black Americans. That's not the case, because we have many Black Americans in middle class, many Black middle class communities with schools that are highly functional and at times outperform white schools. So I think we need to look, I think Chyrel, even Brian and Eddy talked about poverty. That is something we definitely need to look at. That's not just a Black issue, that's an American issue. We need to look at poverty and what's still driving that. Is it something in the system, or is it something in our character? Because a lot of times when you look at other people and what they've done for successful, are we making similar choices? Number two, I believe it all starts at home. And one of the problems within Black families, both in Canada and in the US, is the Black family is not what it used to be, right? And particularly starting in the 60s with the Great Society Act, the welfare state, Black families were starting to become unraveled. It's funny, we want to blame slavery for that, but yet coming out of slavery, the Black family actually stayed intact. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of separation, a lot of things that happened to Black families, but we found a way to stay through it. When you look back at the older days, when I say the early 1900s, and even going up into the 60s, the illegitimacy rate within Black families was like maybe 22, 23%. So four out of five times, if you were born Black, you were born into a household that consisted of a mother and father. That number after Civil Rights Act into the 70s ballooned up to like 40-something%. Today, it's almost 70%. So we found a way to remove the father from the family with the social assistance. Now, I don't think those policies were nefarious, but I do think they had negative effects that we have not been willing to look at. So I believe when you destroy the Black family in the sense of not having a father in the home, you're going to have negative effects. And I think that's one of the major contributions. Number two, from an education standpoint, I think we need to give parents the opportunity, the choice to be able to move their child. If their child is in a school that is not performing well, give them the opportunity to move them to a school, whether it's to another school or to a chartered school, right? There's a lot of debate in America about that. And I find the debate very, very interesting because it has been proven now, not all charter schools are great schools, but a majority of them are very good schools. And the majority of them actually sit in the buildings of public schools. And in some of those schools, they're outperforming the public schools. So I think we need to look at these solutions, potential solutions, and not scorn out them. I think every child has a dollar amount attached from public funding that the parents need to have access to if they need to move their child to a better school, because families with money have that ability to choose the schools that their children could go to if they're in a school that's not performing. And that's not just white Americans, that's also Black Americans who are either in the middle class or have financial means. So I think that's something that we need to look at. There isn't just one singular problem, singular thing that said this is the problem. Maybe there's a lot of things that are connected, but I do believe it starts at home. We need to get back to building the Black family from home. An education is not just from 8 to 3 o'clock. And I think we need to invite parents and young people to be active partners in their education and to get involved again and to get engaged. Easier said than done, particularly when you're impoverished and when you got parents, some parents working 2, 3 jobs. I get it. But my but is this. Older Black Americans found a way to do that. The education level was higher even when we were living in Jim Crow, in segregation. And yet we have more freedoms today, and yet our education is slipping. And we're doing a vast disservice, not just to young people, but to Black people, to America itself, to the world itself. So I think there's a number of things we need to do. We need to have more engaging conversations. We need to put aside egos and hold these school boards account. We need parents to say, you know what, I need to re-engage in my children's educational life and challenge these school boards and challenge these unions that protect teachers that are just not good. We need robust, common sense solutions in regards to when it comes to education, because we're talking about our children. And it is proven when Black families are doing well, their children do well. And we have many examples of that in many communities across the United States and Canada. So I think we sometimes need to stop broad stroking and go, what are exactly we're talking about? Because the same crisis that exists in Black America is the same crisis that exists in Latino Americans and white Americans that are impoverished as well. The same things that we find in our schools, you find in their schools as well. So poverty is a key issue we need to look at. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. So.
Chyrel, you had your hand up. Yep, you mute. Unmute. Chyrel, unmute. Chyrel, you had your hand up. I can't hear you.
I was just going to say, it was strange that you started with education, but poverty isn't just monetary. An impoverished mindset is probably even more difficult to break through than a lack of physical money. And there seems to me to be, in a broader sense, we have just become so complacent in how we deal with just any issue, in my view, whether it's civil rights or post-civil rights or whatever. We have just become, as a people, we have become extremely just disengaged in every front. And there seems to be, like I said, specifically, broader. It's an impoverished mind. We don't seem to really, we're not really concerned about things because we are just so apathetic to everything. It almost seems as if when we suffer more and more of our rights are taken away and we lose more stuff, we're more engaged. But because we've we've, my parents had to do the sit-ins and had to sit in the lunch counters and had to do the heavy lifting so that I could sit wherever I wanted to sit on a bus and go to school. It just seems like my generation specifically, I'm not talking about the generation of my parents, the people that did the work, my dad and John Lewis and those people that actually did the work. I'm talking about the post civil rights movement, the Generation Xers. We're just so comfortable in the work that they did for us that we just seem apathetic. We don't seem willing to anymore. We don't have any more fight at all. And so when you got the kids, the younger generations looking at that we've kind of just sat back on the laurels of, the generation before us, like my parents' generation, that is a bigger problem. It's like we're too comfortable. And I don't know how that even got to even be a thing or an necessary, option. But in my frame of thinking, I think that we're just very complacent. And now at this point, we're not only complacent, but we're complicit because we do a lot of complaining and we want to blame a lot of people for our conditions and what's happened with our civil rights. But we had a say in it and we just kind of sat back on our laurels too. So I think some of the problems that we're now seeing, even with our education and even with some of our civil rights being turned back, it's some of our own fault. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Cheryl. I do agree. Our generation seems like we forgot about the struggles. We feel like, okay, we got it, we got this. We don't have to do any more fighting when it's not true. If you don't continue to fight, then everything will fall apart. You have to maintain what you've already done. While you have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on Cheryl's comment. I do agree with you, Cheryl. I think a lot of it is mindset. But what mindset? Because, you talked about when our civil rights are being taken away. From what I can tell, there are no civil rights being taken away from any Black person. From my perspective, there's never been a better time to be Black, particularly in America and Canada. When I look at the ancestors, recent ancestors, and what they had to go through, and yet still found the intestinal fortitude to build, to create great wealth, by the way. I think there's ignorance that exists within our Black people. And when I say ignorance, I don't mean in a negative way. Ignorance in the sense we just don't know a lot of our history, our recent history. We know what we've been told. We know what we've seen on the news, particularly even about the civil rights movement. Most Black Americans really don't understand the civil rights movement. But when I look at what they did, to your point, through the harshness of Jim Crow and segregation, and build strong, striving communities and strong families with limited opportunities. And we're able to there's so much that were done. When we talk about Black Wall Street is a representation of one town of many towns that were across the United States, Black towns that were striving. Black Wall Street came about because of the ingenuity of certain Black people in the oil field, and they made their wealth from oil in Oklahoma. And we're able to create their own bus lines, their own theaters, their own businesses, their own doctors, their own lawyers. Yeah, it was destroyed, and then it was rebuilt again. It was destroyed, it was rebuilt again. There's an intestinal fortitude that we have lost. I say we, these generations. Number one. Number two, I think we need to go back and look again at recent history. This is one of the reasons I look at data and data, and look at people that are well researched, because the data shows that Black Americans were trending up even before the main Civil Rights Act. And then all of a sudden, when civil rights comes in, you think things were completely opened up, and it almost feels like it went the other way, right? So is it, we like to keep saying there's still systemic racism. These acts show there's no systemic racism, but there's still a mental mentality, to your point, when you talk about mindset. So I think we need to re-educate ourselves on what we have done, what the forefathers and foremothers had done before us, and really understand our history and understand the struggles, but even in the struggles, the greatness that rose from that. We had many women in positions, not just secretaries, that were doing great things. Some of the early executives came out of that era from the 1930s, 1940s, that we don't know about. There's a lot of our own history we don't know about that's denied us understanding our true Blackness. And to some degree, it's hindered white people as well, because they don't even know our history. And then there's many things for that. I'm not going to get into that. But I think today, I've heard many times when people say, you know, you got to pick yourself up by the bootstrap, and they now use that as almost as a derogatory term. But yet, this is what our forefathers and foremothers did. They picked themselves up by the bootstrap and said, be damned to what the environment we're in, we're going to succeed. And many of them did. And today, the majority of Black people sit in the middle class, not in poverty. So once again, we broad stroke these things and make it sound like it's everyone. That's not the case, because the majority of Black people, at least that I know, are doing well. They're striving well, educated, high-paying jobs. And I'm not just talking about the athletes. That's one of the reasons in the third show I said Jordans versus books. We seem to still think the only way to get out of anywhere is through athletics or movies. No, many Blacks are striving in aeronautics and engineering and mathematics and medicine, not just acting and sports, teaching. We need to encourage our kids and change the mindset, because the slavery that still exists is a mental one. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
I agree with you, Rawle. Eddy put in the comments, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And that is so true. You have to have a belief system in something. You cannot just stand in the middle of the road. You stand in the middle of the road, you're going to get hit from one side, the other, or both. And Chyrel, she put in the comment, voting rights has gone backwards. Politicians are right now trying to eliminate affirmative action, EEOC, and diversity inclusive policies are now on the chopping block. That is directly an assault on Black civil rights. This is true. They, in many states, Tennessee is one, where they have, they're trying to totally eliminate equity, diversity, and inclusion especially in your workplaces. And it is mostly being done on a state level. It cannot be done on the federal. What they're saying is, if you get federal or get state funding, and you foster diversity, equity, and inclusion, then they'll cut your funding. And this is simply because it has gotten to a point where you have to have so many percentages of Black, so many percentages of white. So it's kind of, they feel like it's reverse discrimination, because you're choking out the whites. They want it back where I have a say so as how many Blacks I want, whether I want Blacks or not. They can't totally chop away and say, no, we're not going to have any, but you can't do that. What they're trying to do.
I'm a person that doesn't attach DEI to civil rights. DEI is a new initiative. I myself personally think it's time we do get rid of affirmative action. We live in a time now. I heard a minister say this a little while ago. Black people are looking for a key to a door that is wide open. I don't need anything from the white man, period. Everything is there for us if we want it. Everything.
It's always been
Access to
there.
university, access to work. I don't. This is one of the things. And I'm not saying you are, Cheryl, but I think when we talk about our rights are being taken, voting rights, that sounds like the narrative that the media keeps pumping. Well, Black people don't have ID, so they can't vote. I don't know a Black person that doesn't have ID. You can't buy cigarettes in the States without ID. You can't drive. You can't buy liquor. So I think we sometimes we need to pump the brakes and go, okay, is there truth in what we're seeing and hearing? Because I don't think that's the true reflection. Many of the Blacks that I talk to that live in America, so, like my cousin lives right in the South as well. He goes on Chyrel. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I don't know what they're talking about. So, and this is why these kind of dialogues are important, because they're, it's not that Cheryl is right and I'm wrong. No, not at all. I want to hear it all. Sorry, Brian, you raised your hand. Yeah.
Brian, unmute.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't even know how to use the little hand device icon. You know what? I think both things can be true. I'm 200% behind taking responsibility and building. I was a teenage father. I raised 4 kids. I educated them. I didn't look for handouts. I put the work in. But also we cannot pretend that we just endured nearly 400 years of the most horrific treatment, in our country that we love. We can't avoid that. So both things can be true.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like Rawle's point. Speaking of the African diaspora, I had wrote down, that you can't lump all Blacks together because there are cultural differences within the African diaspora. We all went through different things, different degrees, different levels of oppression. And I believe we're, doing the best we can in surviving, but it's very hard to lump it all together. Also, when we speak of statistics, I've never been a big fan of statistics because statistics can be, manipulated to
Mm-hmm.
illustrate the point of the person who is, trying to prove their point. And then lastly, the mother and father aspect is very important indeed, but the father may be there, but is the father productive? Is the father loving? Is the mother loving and creating an environment that the children can grow? Just the parents being there. It's not the most important thing. Nathan McCall wrote a book called Make Me Want to Holler, which I often quote and love. And he was saying sometimes it's better if the father's not there, if he's going to be destructive to the child's mental, physical, and spiritual health. So just those points. Thank you.
They're good points, and I think whether mother or father, both can be destructive if they're not good with themselves. To your point about statistics, I use statistics not to prove arguments, but when we are looking to improve anything, you got to have a baseline to start somewhere. It can't just be about feeling. I feel this. What do you measure it against? How do you measure success if you're looking to improve anything? This is why one reason I love Thomas Sowell. He looks for data and facts to dispute the myths that we live by. And he always says that stats and data is just a starting point to give you an idea of where we are. Because you're right, depending on who's using the data, it can be manipulated. And a lot of times too, when we use these broad strokes, when you go deeper into the numbers, you'll sometimes see wider discrepancies. So that's one of the reasons I use data, not to prove an argument, right? To say, here's a potential starting point. Because like I said, when I look back at Black people from Booker T's day to W.E.B.'s day, to Cheryl's point, it was a different mindset. It was a different mindset. And maybe we have grown up in too much decadence. We have too much, I don't know. But she is right. The mindset has definitely shifted. So anyway, sorry, Anjie, I don't want to throw off your timeline.
No.
I knew this would be a good subject for us to get into.
You're good. Um, all of you all, I agree with all of you all, especially when our youth don't realize that how many Black people came out of slavery and went on to own businesses. They went on to invent things that we use every day, like heating, HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Things that are very important to us. We don't know. They don't know how important and how intelligent we are. They don't understand that in 1926, Blacks had one of the largest bus lines. They could sit anywhere. And there was a question posed, why would Black people stop riding on a bus that they could ride anywhere to go fight to ride a bus where they can't sit anywhere? You got a bus line, but now you want to go fight to ride somebody else's bus line. See, the kids don't understand what we already had. So I agree with all. Eddy, can you just raise your hand so I don't have to keep reading your stuff? Eddy, unmute and say what you got to say.
You're doing a good job. I'm sorry about that. I'm just taking all this information in. I agree with you. We really strive back in the day. I mean, African Americans inventors back in the day invented security system, traffic lights, elevators, and fridges. I deeply agree with
GPS.
you. Exactly.
Mhm.
It just pains me seeing like it seemed like we're not we, but some African Americans are progressing backwards if you catch my drift. We're more non-compliant. We fight each other. We do anything to get success in our lives, even if we backstab our friends, our family. It's just sad where are we going? I'm sorry. I hope I'm not.
No.
No, don't be sorry, Eddy. All voices are welcome here. All opinions are welcome. And even if you don't agree with someone's, opinion, you respect them for having it. This is how we can hopefully get to a point where we come up with good ideas and good solutions. We need to talk more. We can agree to disagree. Some things Chyrel said I don't agree with, but I still love my sister because I know in her heart she loves her people. Everyone in this panel loves their people. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. There's many ways to the summit in this regards to Brian's point. Both points could be right at the same time. So don't ever apologize for that at all. So
I agree. If we don't talk, we don't learn, we don't share ideas, we can't move forward because my idea does not mean that it's correct, but you can have something to piggyback on my idea that makes it work. Mm-hmm. Teamwork makes your dream work. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure who this is. The tag says his poet. She writes, these type of dialogues are absolutely necessary. I live in Texas, and I can tell you that many of the Black people here are so indoctrinated to what they have been told. And when you even think to challenge their traditions, many shut down or even become verbally aggressive. The old saying, if you want to hide something from a Black person, put it in a book. Still rings true. Amen. Still rings true in this day and age. This reality is quite unfortunate because there is a very prevalent deficiency within the construction of the Black homes of younger generation. We must start with our younger generation or to instill a sense of pride and veneration within them. I agree totally. I was just having a conversation with my granddaughter, who's an A student, but she told me, I don't like to read. Why do I have to read when I can listen to the book? I said, because you might not have that availability. You need to learn how to read. Yeah. Reading is knowledge.
Yes.
And if what she's if the adage is true, if you want to hide it from a Black person, put it in a book, then all of our youth are just dumb and lost because they do not like reading.
You know, I chuckled when you said that, and I also cried a bit because it's sad
Right.
that's still true.
And
I don't know about you guys. I remember coming home when we were kids in Brooklyn, going to school and drop our bags off and then run back outside and played. And then when mom came home, you know, it was time to get your butt in the house. You showered up, and then you got to the kitchen table while she cooked dinner, and you did your homework.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had no homework to do, you found something of intelligence to do. Whether you get an atlas out and you play Find This. One of my favorite things to do is to get an encyclopedia and just get lost in it. I still like to think many parents still do that. Many still do that, particularly in Black families. I'd sent Anjie a video a little while ago of a video I found from 1964. It was a gathering of young Black professionals that lived in Los Angeles that had serious concerns about the migrants that were coming out of the South, Black migrants, leaving the South, coming in, populating the North and all these places. And they were seriously concerned that they gathered to go, what are we going to do when they get here? Because of the education level, the ignorance, they're going to destroy what they have built. These were young professional Black people thinking this way and verbalizing it. So to me, even in our Black communities, we saw this a long time ago. There's a certain level, a certain amount of Blacks that want to be stuck in that ignorance that to some degree is almost dragging everyone down and making it sound like all Black people are struggling. And this is what we have to decipher. What is the truth behind that? Because, like I said, it's not that there isn't poverty. The majority of Blacks, from what I can tell, are doing well in various degrees of what well means, but they're doing well. Highly educated. It's the most educated Black people have ever, well, maybe it's not. But we're definitely, particularly women, filling our college hallways, Black women. So it's interesting. So yes, Brian, you were.
When she also said that too, there was a bit of humor in that, and as you say, it was a dual, like, oh, really, I wanted to sigh a bit, and then my next thought was, who made that phrase? You know, who who was the first to say that?
Yeah.
But I guess it really doesn't matter if that was told to us or if someone felt that way within our community and said it. There is an element of truth in that as you said, carries a weight. And then to your point about the migration from the South to the North, you are absolutely correct, because I distinctly remember in the 70s and 80s, the term Bama was, you know, my grandfather was from outside of Birmingham, Alabama. It was used as a derogatory term within the Black community, especially in the DMV, Washington, D.C. area, to describe Blacks that were, you know, you Obama, look how you dress, you know, you're not chic, you don't have, you know, so that made me chuckle a little bit. You're absolutely right on that, Rawle.
Yeah. And oddly enough, the Harlem Renaissance, the majority of the Black men and women that led that Renaissance came out of the South, but educated. Thomas Sowell came out of the South. And that's why education is so important. It's so important. And that's why I find it interesting that, like I said, I just believe we were more educated, more well-rounded in our education back then than we seem to be today. Seem to be. I say seem to be because I still think there's a narrative of poor Black people and all Black people are this and that. Well, you know, you want to hide something, best place to put it is in a book. I could see that coming out of slavery, because you remember it was against the law to teach Black people how to read. You could actually be killed if you were caught reading, right? They wouldn't kill the white person, but they would definitely face severe penalties or reparation penalties for teaching someone to read. So I can see that coming out of that. But then we have adapted it, and it's like this badge of honor. Right? This is why the next show, Jordans versus books, is going to be an interesting one. Anyway, great conversation. Sorry, Miss Anjie, you can get us back. It's like herding cats. You can herd us back together if you like. So.
No, you're good. I was looking up trying to see who made the phrase that if you want to hide it from a black person, so you can't say stuff to me. I have to look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm X was one of the people that made that phrase, and also Dennis Haynes. So he heard that growing up, and I've heard that often, that if you want to hide it, but Malcolm X is one of the people that did say that.
Yeah.
Chyrel says that among the things that Blacks invented, it was the stoplight, cell phone, washing machine, feminine sanitary products, all created by Black inventors. Yes, 90% of the things that we use today and we will use tomorrow are invented by us. And the only people Black kids know about is Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Frederick Douglass. They know nothing about who truly, even though they were slaves, who truly, a lot of people as slaves invented things.
Mm-hmm.
So in that respect, if we don't educate our youth, we can't expect them to fight for something that they know nothing about. They can sit in the front of the bus, so why do we have to fight for that? You can do everything you want to do, so why would we have to fight for that? They don't understand that you have to maintain. It's just like when you go get your hair done. If you don't keep it up, it's going to grow buck wild. So you have to maintain. And I think as far as our generation, that's our job. I don't care if you in schools or in churches, wherever you are, we're poets. We're supposed to be able to bring the light to the world anywhere.
This is why if we know more about Thurgood Marshall, not just Martin Luther King, really understand Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm X was not for segregation. He was desegregation. He was for separate and equal. Many of the actual early civil rights fighters were for not desegregation, but segregation, but equal. But if you know of, we really need to go back and really bring back Booker T. Washington into our fray and understand Booker T. But understand some of the recent brothers and sisters. Dr. Ben Carson. Ben Carson should be plastered all over in regards to his story. When we see that what they've done, the light filament, Edison gets credit for creating the light bulb. The light bulb doesn't work with the filament in it. That was created by a Black man.
Black man.
GPS, the original GPS was created by a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
NASA could not have gotten to beat the Russians to the moon without Black women worked at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
And these were women and men that worked and lived in the South.
Mm-hmm.
Highly educated, Black families, Black neighborhoods that were striving. So we've done it. We've been doing it, I think. But I think that we just don't know about it, right? To Cheryl's point, we were not educated enough to understand it. So that mindset is not, again, that's why education is so important. Anyway, sorry, guys.
And that's true. That's what Eddy highlighted. Knowledge is power. When I was growing up, that was G.I. Joe. Now, I know I'm not that old, but everybody don't know who G.I. Joe is. And one of the things, the thing that they said in every show, knowing is half the battle. So if the more you know, the more you grow. Yes, I was a G.I. Joe fan, and we did it in stereo.
We also need to grow our population. Our population has been stagnant, although over the last 10 years it started to grow, a lot of it because of immigration, but the Black population was stuck for the longest time. But going back to a point Brian made, you can't just lump all Black people, because I was born in Trinidad. And I find it interesting that Blacks from other parts of the world can come to America not all, but many, and do well. The income median in America, the highest, is not white Americans. It's Asian. Then it's Asians, and I believe it's Farsi, Middle Eastern, and then African, Nigerian, Ugandan. So because if America was so racist, the systemic racism we talked about, black is black. They don't look at you and go, oh, he's African, give him a pass. So if others can come here that has the same skin color as we do and strive and do well, what does that say? And when I say, what does that say? Not to say there's something wrong with black people, but are we missing something? To Cheryl's point, the mindset, what's going on, right? That's something I want us to really look at and not to be afraid to look at. Brian?
Yes, they did not endure the horrific treatment, the families being torn apart, being sold, being hung, being brutalized. And most importantly, they have a sense of who they are. They can tell you who their grandfather did and what he did before him, and they can go back. And when you come over with that sense of pride, that sense of knowledge of not only your people but your environment, your land, your culture, then that makes it easier to uh to have success. Whereas if during slavery, if you're being torn apart and the seed is being planted here and you don't trust this one or that one, it makes it more difficult. You have to work twice as hard in order to build that family structure back together. As your point earlier, Rawle, you have to build that back together and then create a loving environment. Once you have that, then you can proceed and do these things. But that's not taking away anything from other groups that come here and do well.
No,
Work
no,
is work.
no.
Work is work. I mean, when you come over here, you got to put in the work. So I'm definitely going to give them credit. But at the same time, we can't, like I said, both things can be true. I believe in taking responsibility, but we cannot pretend that slavery did not have a major effect in our mental, spiritual, and financial,
But whether you're
wherever,
African or
in
West
my opinion.
Indian, slavery played a part in it because I come from an island that was enslaved. It was enslaved by the British, the Spanish for the little time they were there. Many Africans, same thing. So we didn't experience it in America. It's very similar. The destruction of family, the lynchings. I mean, John Lynch came from the island of Jamaica. They brought him in to teach the American slave owners how to deal with their slaves. So that, I that's why I disagree with you a little bit, because whether you're West Indian or African, you still experienced. You didn't experience it in America, or my ancestors didn't experience it in America, but they experienced it in Trinidad. That same degradation, don't know who you've come from. I remember, one time I was coming home from partying while I was, a young man in Toronto. I jumped in the back of a cab, and the driver was from Africa, and we started talking. And all of a sudden, I had this moment of sobriety. I sobered up, and this thing came over me, feeling like, oh my God, I could be talking to a relative and not know who it was. Right? So I get it. I do get it. I've heard that before, but West Indians, Africans, we had our own trials and tribulations. And that's what I'm saying. Let's say the system is truly still racist. They don't look at you and go, that's African, that's West Indian. They just see you as black. So, but having said that, like I said, this is something I think we need to explore and unpack more. So to your point, you could be right, I could be right, both could be right at the same time. Either way, it's something we do need to look at. Why do other blacks come here and they seem to experience more success? Why? There's got to be a reason why. And I don't know if I have all the answers, but it's something I think we should be willing to look into. We should, because we have so much more success than LeBron James and Beyonce. So
those points kind of bring us to our next question, especially the point showing that Blacks are resilient. Slavery in its own right helped us to be resilient because we had to prove that you can't hold us down because we got to be free. So you had to be resilient to be, and once you were free, you had to be able to take care of yourself. So yes, we are resilient. And that brings us to our next question. Research shows that between 1865 and 1900, approximately 2,000 Blacks were elected officials. If this was possible before the Voting Rights Act of 1965, what do you think caused the creation of the Voting Rights Act of 1965? If we already had over 2,000 people, Black people, in officials as Congress, all of those between 1865 and 1900, what do you think caused us to have to even create that? What happened? What made us feel like we needed an act? We
Is
were
it
already
19
doing this now.
Is it 1865 to 1900 or 1865 to 1960? Because I don't.
Between 1865 and 1900,
Okay.
there are 2,000 Blacks just in that. Now, we're not even talking about in our lifetime. This is before our lifetime.
And this isn't just people in Congress, just in
No,
official
these were
capacities.
all areas
Right.
in Washington.
Right.
All areas. If we were doing that then, what do you think happened to make us have to have the Voting Rights Act of 1965? Brian, you were gonna be starting anyway. Brian, you're itching.
Well, you
Cheryl,
know,
you're after that, then Eddie.
okay. Just briefly, if I could take a stab in the dark, I would have to say it has something to do with the South in terms of the power of the vote, the terms of the way of rezoning areas that lessen the impact of minority groups. Um, I think I think that would probably be my guess. But I'm no scholar in that area. But I believe that that would be the issue. Just to present that to the panel.
Yes. The whole thing is it was possible before we even had those acts. It was possible. We were flourishing. So what happened to make us have to do a step back? I'm gonna give Cheryl a break. I picked her first last time.
So I was going to
Let's
ask, are you okay, Chyrel? Or yeah, okay.
Eddie, Eddie, I'm gonna let you go. Cheryl, you'll be after Eddie.
Sure. Great question. I think what happened is all the African American came together and tried to tried to change the system. I think if we have the same initiative back in the day, we would be better off today, if that makes any sense. It's like my enemy is your enemy, so let's become friends. Let's change the system for the better.
It's good. Yeah.
Cheryl, what are your thoughts?
I don't know because I have different experiences being from Mississippi, watching what my parents and the people of their generation had to go through with Jim Crow and counting jelly beans and trying to vote. So my whole experience is a whole lot different. And I'm coming from it from watching what they had to go through. My grandmother having to count jelly beans and being beaten when she went to try to cast a vote because women were not allowed to vote. Black women specifically were not allowed to vote. Black men. So there was just a whole systematic system in place under Jim Crow here in my specific place of living in the segregated South, which did not lend to Black people casting ballots and being active in politics. So that's my experience. So I don't have a reference of knowing this great time where Blacks were flourishing and voting, because that was always withheld from us. It might be different, Brian, from you where you are in Tennessee, but I'm speaking from where I am in Mississippi. We were not allowed. My parents' generation, my grandparents could not vote because they would be beaten or killed. Their houses were burned down to the ground. The Klan was riding and doing night rides. My grandfather and my father were hidden in the floor. A panel was made in the floor for them so that when knocks in the middle of the night came and they were asking for their sons, they were hidden in panels to keep them safe. So I don't have a reference for knowing when things were great for Black people. Thank God we did get the Civil Rights Act and things like that, because it did help us to live more like human beings. So that's where I'm coming from.
Mhm.
I understand that because I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. And Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, that's called the Dirty South. And it ain't called the Dirty South for nothing. But Cheryl, one of the things I do know is that in 1890, 1870, I had to get the name, I had to look it up so I can get the name correct. Hiram Revere, he was from Mississippi, and he was a Black politician. He was one of the first Black politicians to be seated in that time period before the civil rights, and he was from Mississippi. When I saw from Minnesota he was from Mississippi, it kind of shocked me because I would not have thought that that was going to happen in Mississippi. So yeah, we were doing some things back then, but Jim Crow and his buddies decided we didn't deserve that right.
Yep.
So, and yes, my parents went through the same thing, the having to make sure you knew how to read. You had to take all these stupid little tests. And as you saw, when our civil rights actually stopped that. You don't have to go through all of those changes just to be able to vote. Yet, we still had people in offices. We were still voting long before that act was even put in place. So I guess one of the things we do need to look at is what happened. What happened?
To Brian's point,
All it says, all you can ever, I'm not through doing my research. I've done a lot of research on this, but it just tells you, okay, this is, we had to start doing this, but it never tells you why. You never see a why. You just see an action. So as far as us being Blacks, when it comes to voting, I do agree we do need to use that right. I don't feel like you should vote just because. If you don't believe in what you're voting for, you're still defeating the purpose. You shouldn't vote for just because. You're supposed to vote because you know and you feel that you're voting for the right thing. I knew your hand was going up, Rob. I could see it all over your face.
I started to interject and I had to remember my own rules. So
no, I knew you were coming. I knew it was, I was waiting.
Well, to Brian's point, just because we highlight that there were men that were elected to Congress during Reconstruction does not mean what Chyrel was saying is wrong. A lot of that was still going on. That, why do we have so many civil rights acts? A lot of times it's because you have a new administration and everybody wants to put their spin on being right with history. So if you go back and you reread a lot of what you read, they're basically a lot of the same things, right? So that could be a reason why. The reason why I highlight, even during the harshness of Jim Crow and segregation, the Black success is to let Black people know we, even in the harshness of those draconian systems, still found ways to strive and do well, right? So And then I look at that was then. Where are we today? Because a lot of times we act like what happened back then is still going on today. And many Black people still believe what happened in the South is still happening today. And I'm not one of those people. Now, I'm not ignorant to think that there aren't idiots out there that have racist thoughts in the way we think of racism. Right? But today, So in order to understand where you're going, you have to understand where you've come from. And my invitation to everyone is always to not look back at the past with this disdain and anger. We didn't go through it. Our job is to understand and to learn from it, right? Because how many more civil rights acts do we need? We don't need any more. So I just felt it was important to say that just because during Reconstruction, we had 10 different Black men, 4 of them were from Mississippi, not just one. That doesn't mean what Chyrel and her family experienced, and many families like her experienced, that doesn't mean that wasn't going on as well.
Right.
That doesn't mean that at all. So.
Because I do know, I don't do Mississippi now. I go to Mississippi, whatever I got to do, I do it, I'm gone. I don't play in Mississippi now. And there are certain parts of Alabama. When I'm going home to Birmingham, I have to go through Coleman, Alabama. I go through, I pray my car don't stop. I pray nothing don't happen because I do not want to have to come out in Coleman because Coleman, Boaz, those places in Birmingham, well, in Alabama, they're still racist.
Yeah.
Sand Mountain, you cannot, as a Black person, be caught on Sand Mountain after dark. If you do, there could be a problem.
Yeah.
You cannot. Yes, Brian. Unmute. There you go.
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, I'm sorry. Were you finished with your point? I didn't want to interject.
I can do it.
Oh,
You're good.
okay. Actually, I'm not from Tennessee. I'm from Virginia. But I tell you something. Like I said, my grandfather was from Alabama, and I have many family in North Carolina and South Carolina. But a story in Virginia, I was looking to buy some land as the children were getting a little bit older, and I was looking at an area called Martinsville, Virginia, because my wife is from Alton, that area, Danville area, and we got taken around, lovely homes, cheap price. I'm like, okay, I'm excited. I'm a writer. I can, finally write that book. And so the realtor takes me to the country club and he says, I would like you to meet someone. And so I'm like, oh, okay. I'm looking around. We're the only African-American family, but I didn't think nothing of it. Then he brings out the chef, who's an African-American, as if to say, see, hey, he's the head chef here, and I'm looking like, I looked at my wife and like, why did he feel it necessary to do that? And so I started looking up Martinsville, and there was a book called Martinsville 7, where 7 young Black men were hung in the 1920s or 30s unjustly, and it was a huge civil rights thing.
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself in my spirit, I couldn't move that to that city after that. So the South is a very interesting place. I have a love-hate relationship with it, but I can't see myself ever moving out of it. So it's kind of strange. I just wanted to make that point.
I'm an Alabamian through and through. I live in Tennessee, been here since 95. I tell anybody, I'm a Roll Tide. I'm a Bama girl through and through. And you know what? The South has the best hospitality. I don't care where you go. You're going to get that love from everybody in the South. Our next question, which is our final question. I guess you guys come up with some more. In a way, you've already answered this question, but we're going to do it anyway. The Civil Rights Act of 1991 is designed to strengthen laws against workplace discrimination. In your opinion, which ways has workplace discrimination been mostly eradicated? If you don't see that it's been eradicated, Tell me how not. You can play with that question any way you want. Eddie, we're gonna start with you this time. And no, Eddie, you cannot write it in the chat.
Love you too. Great question. Try to gather my thoughts. I have to say hmm, it's more of race in a way. If that makes any sense, it's more of a I'm trying to give you an example. Like if Tom is black and if Ron was light, Ron will, I think 90% or 100% get a raise, and they work the same job and they work the same hours. So I think it has to be race, and I have to think it has to be more of a more of conditionals, like more skills. So there's a lot of stuff to play in the workplace. To answer just one, I think it has to deal with race and just qualifications.
So you're saying that in the workplace, um, the racism is not based on any color. There's that has been mostly eradicated, not totally, but mostly. And Cheryl made a point where they were trying to take away the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Do you think that plays a part into the workforce? The discrimination part, will that help it, or does that get rid of it? Does DEI, is it effective when it comes to your workplace discrimination?
I'm coming from this from a whole different, like almost like from backwards, because we wouldn't have to have diversity, equity, and inclusion if it were equitable, if it were diverse, if it were this utopia, but it isn't. It really isn't here in Mississippi. Now, understand that I've spent only half of my life here. The other half of my life, where I was born and raised in Chicago, in the North, that is a real strange place for me to be, because I am coming as my mother and father's child, who were very active in civil rights, spending summers here with my grandparents who were in the segregated South here. So when I'm angered by the Confederate flags hung up in the courthouse and other Black people are just walking by it as if, oh, that's just part of Southern culture, I'm offended, and my mother is putting her hands over my mouth because I'm saying, do you see that atrocity that's sitting outside of the courthouse? And my parents are trying to quiet me because, girl, you're from the North. You can't, it's a different way of life here. So to me, it isn't equal. It's not equitable. The justice system is entirely different in the South than it is for me when I go back home, a girl from the South side of Chicago. It's entirely, but then it's the same because I'm seeing young Black men and Black boys swung up in trees here. And the police are doing the same thing, gunning them down in the streets back home in Chicago, in the streets where I live. So to me, it's not equitable. It's not just. And that's really all I have to say about that. So in the workplace, it may be a little bit better for a Black woman back home in Chicago. But again, generally, it's just better for Black women, I feel. It's easier. It's not a 100% great, but it is a little bit easier, I think.
South is different. But at the same time, still have the same opportunities. We just have to take them. We might have to work a little bit harder to get there, but the door is still open. We just have to take the initiative to walk through it and stop thinking about this is a predominantly white this or this is a predominantly white that. Because I grew up, the only time I saw white people was when I went to the mall and they was walking on one side and I was walking on the other. Not because we didn't want to be each other. It was just that's just what we did. It was not because there was segregation. It was not because we disliked each other. It was just because that's just what we did. There was no rhyme or reason. That's just what we did. And I guess that you could say that that was a Southern thing. Mrs. Port has her hand up.
Yes, and thank you so much. Very interesting question because there's many factors to it, in my opinion. The first factor being perspective. And I think that perspective is shaped a lot by demographics because what people are used to up north or in New York or in California is quite different to what we're accustomed to in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama. When you said there were some parts of Mississippi that you know you just will not touch with a 10-foot pole, basically. When I lived in Georgia and I would drive from Georgia through Alabama, through Mississippi to Texas and on through, and I could not stand driving through Alabama and Mississippi because I knew what was there. I had experienced what was there. And you get the looks and you get the glares. I've been in other places and my color isn't even a factor. You know what I'm saying? I've been in jobs in Georgia and got paid literally what seemed to me slave wages in 2017. And for a job, and I had ridiculous experience. So I experienced the racism in that aspect of not only being a woman, but being a Black woman, because they automatically think that there's certain things you're not privy to. They automatically think that there's certain things you're not culturally accustomed to. So therefore, they have the one up on you. But what I've noticed in other cities where I've lived in, when I've or visited or whatever, I've had poetry events and been the only one when I went to Massachusetts to a poetry festival and there was only one other person who looked like me and she acted like she looked like them. You understand? And when they came to me, they didn't come to me as a Black woman. They were so fascinated more so by Texas, right? And of course, the flair and just who I am went along with it, and I was accepted in their circle and embraced. But it took some time for them to ease in because I think that a lot of them don't know what to expect when it comes to Black people, right? Because there's so many different types of lives that we live and personalities. I've been noticing just of late how culturally you have certain parts of a city where the people who you might call it poverty or welfare or whatever, most of the time they live a certain way, not all the time. But then when you go over to another side and you have other people, there's certain things that's in place, certain things that look different, certain things that seems different. And so you have to say, where did this set mindset come from, where amongst a lot of our people, there seems to be a sense of chaos, a sense of disruption, and a sense of lack in a lot of situations for people that look like us. And so I think that what the brother said, we do have to work a little bit harder. We might have to move. There's a certain way that I speak, but I'm also be sure that I don't lose myself in being educated. I don't lose my true personality in being in the know about the topics, the things that they discuss, right? So I'm genuine within myself. And I think that as people, Black people, that's the best thing that we can do collectively is be genuine, be educated, be bold, and teach the younger generation how to do the same and how to come through and claim those jobs and let their greatness and their excellence show far above and beyond just by being what? Their natural selves. Thank y'all.
Thank you for that comment. I totally agree. Thank you very much. Cheryl, your hands up. Cheryl, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say there just always seems to be kind of like a double-edged sword because I can remember coming back as an adult and going on job interviews. And because I don't sound or I don't have a Southern accent necessarily, I can remember a Caucasian person that was interviewing me saying, "Oh, you're a Yankee," looking at my resume because I do not have the Southern drawl. So it definitely is. You know, you see the differences being born and raised in Chicago and living here as an adopted daughter in the South. You get the racism or you get the differences in ways that you're not even looking for it necessarily. So there's that.
The South is different. I don't care how you look at it, but you have to, in any place, you have to make your opportunities because they're not going to be given to you, regardless of what color you are. Like I said, I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. One of my childhood friends, that although she was older than I was, she was killed in that 16th Street bombing. So yeah, I get it. I understand that. And yes, I've worked where I was the only Black there. And they walk around not really sure what to say. You sitting there going, okay, just talk to me. I talk like you do. But once they get used to you, they're pretty cool. They will warm up to you, but you have to always be a friend if you want a friend. Does anyone else have any more comments?
I wanted to add to this, especially someone that spent a large chunk of his life in the corporate world. This is why it's important to listen to everyone's experience, because not every Black experience is the same experience. I've never experienced racism. I've experienced discrimination and prejudice. But racism, there's nothing standing in the way. Or even when I was starting off in the business world, there was nothing standing in my way. Did I run into people because of their ignorance that wanted to close doors? Definitely. Definitely. I also ran into more people that opened doors. And I think we have this perception, Chyrel used the word, it wasn't equitable, it wasn't equal. And I think sometimes, going back to mindset and perceptions, we have the perception that there should be 50-50. I find it interesting, you're not going to get 50-50 out of 14% of a population. I think sometimes we're seeing the true representation of the demographics of America, and we assume that a lot of places are racist. No, they're not racist, but you'll find people in there that definitely are prejudiced and practice discrimination, right? But having said that, I don't want to make a blanket statement because there are people out there that have really true racist thought, and some of them sit in positions of power. I don't know how you're going to get rid of that. I really don't. I don't care what civil rights acts you pass. You're not going to get rid of that unless we can control people and how they think. So I think we have to kind of look at, that's why it's interesting listening to someone like Chyrel. Not just her parents, but to some degree, she experienced it with her parents. And take that experience into account and not say, well, that was then. It's real because it's real to her. Right? What Brian experienced is real. I remember when I was traveling across the States and I was just outside of Omaha. And I got caught in this major rainstorm, and we were walking, and I passed by this lone convenience store like you see in a movie. And there's an old white man sitting outside. It's freaking late at night. He's sitting outside in the rain. And he goes, "Where are you boys going?" I said, "We're just walking, trying to get out of the rain." He goes, "Well, whatever you do, don't get caught on these roads, because there's still many in these parts that won't take kindly to seeing you." And I asked him, I said, why are you warning us? He goes, "Because I'm not like that. But I just wanted you to to know where you are." Right? So I said, "Okay, thank you." And that always stuck with me.
Sad that
When we're denied history, it's not just Black people that have suffered. White people have been suffered. We sometimes forget white people have been conditioned to believe lies for centuries. For centuries. And when you really look at it from a timeline side, it hasn't been that long ago, since 1865. And since 1865, look at how much we've accomplished and done. And look how many white people have moved away from that mindset. I think there's certain things we also have to keep in mind when we're talking about these things. It is not 1865. It's not even 1965 anymore. We're going into 2025. Is racism alive? No. Prejudice and discrimination is still striving. But then again, maybe racism still exists because we keep seeming to want to change the definition of racism. Racism is the same as apartheid. Systems designed to keep one down. That, to me, doesn't exist anymore. But you have people in the system that still have that mindset. And not just white people. You have Black people that have that mindset. Because if you're going to talk racism, from my personal, some of the worst racism that I ever faced was from my own. And I don't care who's doing it. It's not cool. Today, not years ago. Today, what are we doing today? This is why we need to hear more experiences like Chyrel's, like Brian's. I don't want to call you his poet. Is it Chyrel? Am I saying that correctly? I want to hear more experiences and take them all into account, because when we take little pieces of everything, we get a better picture. When I look at my corporate days, I saw very few Blacks like me. And then I realized what I was seeing was actually a representation of the demographics that I live in, because I live in a country where 76% of the people still identify as white. The Black population in Canada is only 4%. How do you get 50% out of that? We need to go back and look at what we're really talking about. Are the opportunities there? Hell yes. I've had many doors open for me, and I know many Blacks like me who have had many doors open for them. I've also heard the stories of people who feel that they were denied as well. I'm not going to sit there and say they were false or they were wrong, but that's their experience. I think America is an evolving thing, and we have to let her evolve, and we have to find, that's why I was talking, one of the shows we're going to do down the road is around religion and the Black church. Where's the forgiveness? When are we going to get past all this and forgive and say, okay? When? Because I live in a time where I see many Black people striving from all walks of life. So it's not an easy solution. There isn't one thing to say, this is the problem. To our poet friend from Texas, there's many things. It's not just one thing. But the opportunities are there. Do we have to work harder? Yeah, some cases we do. What's wrong with hard work? I come from a lineage of people that understand hard work. We've actually made hard work a bad thing. They've bombed us. We've built up. They've destroyed it. We built it back up. They destroyed it. We built it back up. What the fuck are we not getting? Look where we come from. Look at the stock we come from. So the opportunities are there. I'll go back to that reverend. I really got to find out who said this, but he said, Black people are looking for a key to a door that is wide open. It's wide open. We got to stop wanting perfection and equality. There's no such thing. Because how do you get 50-50 out of 14%? How do you? Maybe we're getting a representation of the demographics we live in. Maybe. I'm not saying that's it, but maybe. This is why I think affirmative action today needs to go away. We can stand on our own merits. I don't need anyone giving me something and then having people question, are you only there because you're Black? And I remember feeling like that a number of times in my corporate days. And I don't want any young person today to feel that. We have what it takes. We have the skills and abilities if we develop them. Like Booker T said, if we make ourselves valuable, they'll have no choice but to deal with us. And he was proven right. Having said that, it doesn't take away from Chyrel's experience or our friend in Texas, what Brian has gone through, because we all have our own Black experience. And this is why it's important to talk and share about it and understand. Chyrel, I consider Chyrel to be a successful woman. What did Chyrel do to get to where she had? What did Brian do to get to where he's at? Because if he can do it and she can do it, so can others. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys.
I agree. I think that we've had some really, really awesome dialogue today. I think that we learned a lot about each other and we began to understand how we really got to be who we are. Chyrel, I understand the Mississippi thing, girlfriend. I really do. The South is the South. And for years, I know this sounds naive, but because I was raised in Alabama, I honestly never really thought about anywhere else besides Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia having racism. Because that's all you heard about when we were growing up. You didn't hear about racism in the North. You heard Black people were going to the North to get away from the racism.
I actually think racism in the North is worse than in the South.
But see, if you're seeing all the Black people running to the North to get rid of racism, how do you figure there's racism there? Why leave what you already got to go to the same thing?
Yeah.
So I honestly did not think that there was racism anywhere but in those three places.
Can I ask a question? Because Eddy, you're in DC. Brian, you're in DC, but you're in Virginia. Eddy, you were born in DC, right? So the three of you are from the South. I know, Chyrel, you were born in Chicago, but you live in the South now. Why do you guys love the South so much, knowing the history that you know? What is it about it, Brian?
It's the grandmas. It's the
and I only asked the question because there's a part of me that's always been envious of my friends from Brooklyn who had family in the South and they used to go in the South, right?
Yes, it's the grandmas praying for you. It's the resiliency. It's the food. And it's the people. Now, I'm not going to pretend, although my lineage is from Alabama and I have people in South Carolina, North Carolina, I'm not going to pretend like I'm from the Deep South, although I frequently visit there. Alexandria is right across the river from Washington, D.C. But as I said, going down South Georgia and these places, you feel safe, you feel warm. It's you would cross into Danville, even close. Well, I'm in Manassas now, but close to Fredericksburg, and you see that Confederate flag. But when you pull in, somewhere, people are nice as pie. It's just such a confusing love, but it is a love.
Yeah.
Rawle, I'm not trying to be the negative Nancy of the panel, but I do not.
No, you're good, Chyrel. You're good. You're not negative at all.
I do not love, and I have to just, keep it a buck here. I do
Yep.
not love in any capacity the South. Um, Horrible, horrific memories of a child, of being an adult woman, of the fear of having my dad as a small boy being hidden under a wooden floor, with the Klan riding and knocking on my grandparents' door.
Yeah.
Those memories are very real. Those memories are with me, and I'm almost 60. So let me just preface it with, um, in terms of, you were talking about opportunity, the opportunity is more north, but the racism is just as bad.
Okay.
Not to have some idealistic love affair with living in the north, because what the difference is here is you will be called the N-word to your face.
Mm-hmm.
Up north, you will be called the N-word behind your back.
Behind your back, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that many times from people.
Yeah.
My two brothers lived in Atlanta, and they both said that. I remember one time I went down to Atlanta to visit my brothers when I was on a business trip. Because I didn't live in the States, but I spent a lot of time in the States doing work. And I remember one time after a conference, I met my brother at a local grocery store, and we're walking around, and he goes, "Look behind." And I go, "What?" He goes, "Look behind." He goes, "What are you seeing?" I don't know, I see a guy. He goes, "Yeah, it's the store detective following us." And he was following us wherever we go. And here are two professionally dressed Black men, right? So he was just trying to highlight that. He goes, "Yeah, it still happens." But he goes, but then he was the one that says, "But I kind of understand why they do it, because unfortunately, too many young Blacks come in here and steal."
Mm-hmm.
So there's sometimes reasons, maybe you understand it or not, but the point is, I know things are still happening. That's why I asked the question. And you don't ever have to apologize, Chyrel. I want to hear your stories. I want to hear your feeling. I want to feel your anger, because to me, at least you share it in a way that says, I want to know more. And I don't ever want you to feel I'm minimizing your experience. Number one, I can't. Number one, I won't do that. I think it's important we hear all voices, all of them. And you have a very important voice, at least in my circle. So thank you for sharing your rawness with that.
Well, Chyrel, I love the South. I'm sorry. I visited the North, and it was culture shock to me, simply because the simple thing, this one simple thing is what was culture shock to me. In the South, you walk down the street, you speak to everybody, whether you know them or not. Everybody's going to speak, everybody's going to wave. And when I went to Detroit, okay, I'm from the South, I'm speaking. My cousin, but girl, you're going to get us killed. Shut up. You don't speak to people like that. They don't know you. They don't know what you're fixing to do. You can't do that. And to me, I'm like, if you can't be nice to a person or polite, why would I want to live here? So, although there's a lot of negative things that have happened in the South, I still love the South. Maybe because I'm a Bama girl. I like Roll Tide. Maybe that's it.
And that is the strange situation I find myself with, gauging my indignation and anger, because I have gone on job interviews where a Caucasian male will look at something I've written and he will say, "Did you have formal training in law?" And I'll say, "No, I'm a writer." And I don't know if he's trying to insult me at this point, because he won't give me the job, but he'll say, "Oh, this looks as if somebody that studied law wrote this."
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm thinking to myself, okay, so now what is it? For a long time, I said, well, maybe I need to cut my hair. But I don't think that would necessarily help the situation, because I don't know if it must be this Southern thing because it's just strange. So you're thinking about, I don't fit anywhere. I don't fit in the South, even though my grandparents were born and raised here. I go back home, there is more opportunity for sure. But you're fighting the differences on all fronts all the time. And so it really does kind of, it does, you do feel a certain anger start to boil up to the surface because you're tired of fighting the stupid fights of just existence at this point. And you don't want to have to explain yourself all the time. And I think that for me is where the anger is coming from, because I feel like I'm having to explain myself to my brothers and sisters who are Black. And then I feel like on the other side of it, I'm having to explain it to people that really should get it, that do not get it. And it's not my responsibility for them to get it. So,
yeah.
Yes.
There was a time there where I thought we were getting past this hurdle, and it seemed like after 9/11, we ramped it up again. We just don't want to seem to let racism die. I don't know. Like, there's no one single answer. We have, I keep saying Trayvon, but correct me if I'm wrong. She's got a hand up if you want to say
Yes,
something.
I was about to acknowledge her because she's written some things in the chat. Will you please, Miss? I do not know what your name is because all I see is his poet.
Treva, but his
Treva.
poet is right. Treva, yes.
Oh, there you are. Beautiful.
So, thank you. So, I live in the South. I've lived in Georgia. I've lived in Florida. I'm from Texas, born and raised. I'm making sweet potato pies, y'all, if y'all see potatoes.
What?
Yes.
Send a care package to Canada.
Listen, I'm telling you, I sure would. So for me, it's bittersweet. I guess I love the South because the South is in me. You know what I'm saying? And as we heard, I don't know, pop culture is pop culture, but when Andre 3000 stood up there many, many years ago and said the South got something to say, I stand with that even today. I love being from the South because at glance or at just looking, you might take me for one thing. But then when I open my mouth and start speaking, I don't care if it's white, Indian, Asian, or whatever, you're going to see my soul and my spirit shine through, right? So to me, that's more prevalent even than Black, because that supersedes Black, right? Because now you see my spirit, and whether you racist or whether you whatever, I'm going to be very hard to resist because I do have a Southern swag. And my daddy taught me grace. My daddy taught me finesse. You know what I'm saying? And those are the things that I utilize. Has it been a hard road? Absolutely. It took me a lot to be who I am because that takes hard work.
Yes.
Because guess what? The work on yourself teaches yourself how to discipline is a motor scooter. Do you understand me?
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And discipline will teach you how to behave in certain settings, no matter who you come in contact with, how to handle yourself with decorum, how to be heard, how not to scream out. Because many times when you start yelling at the people that really need to hear it because you're screaming, they will not hear you. You know what I'm saying? So it's how we deliver it. It's how I'm Southern. I'm Southern in my cooking. I'm Southern in the way that I speak. I'm Southern in my laugh. My daddy's from Louisiana. My mama's from Texas, and it's just who I am. And I can't despise it. I can't hate it because in essence, that would be hating a part of myself and a part of my ancestors. And I can't do that. I think it's rich, but I also think that the history of New York is so rich. I've been there and I fell in love with it. I've been to Rochester and it was but it was still really cool.
Yeah.
Been to Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bronx, all of that. And each place I went, I met some people that were different, but I also met some really cool people that if you're cool to them, they just not going to be nasty to you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me, and I just also wanted to tell Sister Sherry, you don't ever have to be sorry for how you feel because your experience is your experience.
Exactly.
Don't ever apologize for that because one thing I know this, some things that I went through and experienced, if I would have written my own story, I know I wouldn't have wrote that. You understand? So we went certain paths and experienced certain things for a reason.
Yes.
We always need that sister who got that fire within
Yeah.
her in that capacity that you have, because you be the one that gets something done. You understand what I'm saying? So
That's why
I
we
just
asked
think
her to
that
be
that's
on.
beautiful.
That's why we asked her to be on the panel.
I love it.
She's
I
got
love
a
it.
powerful voice and
Yes,
lots
she
to
does.
say. Yes, she does.
Yes, she does. I'm
Amen
done.
to
Thank
everything
y'all.
she just said to Cheryl.
Mhm.
I mean, you're a supernova. We can't take that from you. You're a supernova, whether you're in the south, north,
No.
east, what, you're a
Come
supernova.
on.
I want to
Come
know
on.
more of her
That's right.
experiences, and then we need to add that into this because there's a place for all voices, and particularly when you're
Mhm.
open, and at least Cheryl is open to hear other things. She may not agree with it, may not even like it. It may trigger her a bit, but at least she stays in it, and when you stay in it, you stand a better chance of getting through it, especially if we stay in it together. Because there's no one here. That's why I say you don't ever have to apologize ever again. Ever. We've had an example of someone who didn't want to hear things before. You're not that person,
Correct.
right? That's not you. So I want to know more. It's an interesting thing. And man, the more I learn, the more research I do, and the more I learn about our past, I think it's the more I fall in love with our people. I say this in a joking way, but I kind of mean it. We're like cockroaches. They can't, they've tried to exterminate us. They've bombed us. They
Why
beat
can't we
us.
be
They
ants
hung us.
instead of
They
cockroaches?
try to
Come on.
drown us. Because cockroaches know how to survive. This is one of the reasons, not cockroach, but like bats. I love Batman because of that. Bats are the ultimate survivors. We are the ultimate survivors. And we started shit. One of the things with Black people, we think our history only started when we came across those ships.
Mm-mm.
So wrong. We have done amazing things that we don't know or we've forgotten. This is why I think this, and it's only a few of us here, but we're going to put this up and encourage.
Long before that. That's right.
Well, we're the ones that walked out of the Rift Valley. That's what I believe. We're the ones that walked out of the Rift Valley and went on a walkabout and started all this madness. We have done many things. Mansa Musa, right? The great Mali Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Ethiopians. We've done things. We've contributed. Eddy brought up some of the different things we've done. I think, to Cheryl's point, we've kind of gotten complacent. We've gotten lazy. And maybe it's not so much lazy, we've plateaued from the great fights of the early parts of the century, of the civil rights, even leading up into the 70s with Black Panthers and so forth. And we've kind of plateaued, rested, sat back on our laurels. Hopefully we'll ignite that again, because I'm watching Black people do amazing things, but yet a lot of people don't know. When I say a lot of people, I don't mean white people. A lot of Black people don't know what we're doing today and the great successes we have beyond the rappers and the ball players. And don't get me wrong, I love me a ball player because I'm still a football man through and through. But we are more than that. We are way more than that. So anyway, I wanted to just pass on Eddy's. Eddy had to leave because he's being featured, and so he had to leave, but he said thank you for this. He's looking forward to the next installment of this. So let's do the poetry and then we can get out of here.
I pick on Cheryl all the time. It is so much fun. Cheryl, you're first.
I'm just wondering, is Cheryl, because did I misunderstand? Did you say you were going through menopause? Because you keep fanning yourself. Like, are you overheating or?
I actually have a bit of a virus and I have a temperature
Okay.
right now, so I'm
Okay.
really, really hot.
Yeah,
And
because I
I
noticed.
I caught my husband's virus, and it is really had me kind of knocked down for the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, I've been
So
sick
that
too.
that
So
that
okay,
is what is going on right
that's why you're
now.
fine. Okay, because I saw you fanning a lot earlier, so I was just wondering if you were okay. So
No, I've got a little bit of a mild temperature. I'm
okay,
sorry.
so
I'm
I'll
glad
put the
you showed
menopause
up,
thing on
though.
pause then.
I'm going to read, this is called The Black Condition. And I just love this poem. Black child, white world, black boy, black girl, white rules, white fear, black terror, black tears, white laws, black necks, black people we must protect, false accusers, white abusers, black lives, white lies, black fists, white sheets, no justice, no peace.
Second time I'm hearing that piece, powerful piece.
I love that.
Still love that piece. Yeah.
O'Brien?
That was amazing, sis.
Yes, that was amazing.
Yes, it was.
The name of my piece is Reflections of Her, the South, where I compare the South to being in love with a female.
Wow.
She was to me a single drop of cool water, brushed along the dry, cracked lips of a tired laborer. She inspired me with her loveliness in dawns of twilight of violet and mandarin, where birds tweet and crows caw. She held summer captive in her blush, her lips, her kiss, but she is a fickle belle, my love, so I could never settle in a season or time. Yes, I recall, this is how I love her. She was to me a single drop and seed planted in famine, deep within the rich black soil of the Delta. She preached a ministry of kindness and cruelty, and brought to me both the substance of honey and the sourness of vinegar. She became to me like a heavy rain, densely veiled in her mist. There was no vision in her storm. She ignited within me the anger of raging rivers, leaving broken trees, ripped and uprooted wayside, torn asunder by her chaos. And this love, born in the death of a rebel's cry, and upon black backs cracked in fields, men, women, and children branded and bonded with iron marched in an endless despair, their windpipes covered in thorns to prevent speech, their chests full of burning coals and ashes to hollow hearts, sentenced to death before given life, until their longing eternal souls were no longer in her grasp. And in response, my dearest love leaves behind only faith and tears, making her promises hard to trust. Yet still she lives within my core, yet still I yield to her beauty. Yes, this is how deeply I cared. She became to me a foregone forever, lost in the handshakes and nods from strangers in small towns. She became to me lifetimes lost within the loyalty and betrayal of the stars and bars of Dixie. So come, sit a spell. She will lull you to sleep and seduce you. She will become one with you. Yes, I recall. This is how I love her. In peace.
That is a true Black woman right there. I love that poem.
Thank you.
See
That
why?
was
See why I love
fabulous.
this brother? Deep, good stuff, man.
Okay, now we're going to have our our IPC news starting with Sunday, December the 15th, IPC recital will be featuring Bianca. It's the 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. Wednesday, December the 18th is Home is the Heart. That's an open mic. It's at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. December the 30th is our next Above the Noise. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern. Above the Noise is a virtual talk show designed to provide information that allow informed decisions. We're currently diving into a 4-part series entitled Black Like Me, Life in the Diaspora. The next part in this series is Jordans versus Books. We have a series entitled In Celebration. This platform is showcase authors and other talents. It will resume on in January. Cheryl, I think you're being featured in February. All of your books, not one, all 20 of them. Okay, all 20.
We'll have to throw Brian's name on that when he gets his book. So,
Brian, you already have books out, don't you? So you
Yeah, I'm a part of maybe 30 or 40 books, but I have 2 under consideration with the Carnegie Mellon and Yale University right now that looks like they're going to get processed.
nice.
we're gonna have to throw you out there in the limelight too. And I was not able to read your full bio, nor was I able to read Cheryl's full bio. I want you to know could not even dream to do as many things as you all have done. Hats off to you. I'm proud of you. Okay, I know you're not little kids, okay, but I'm still proud of you.
No, I think it's important to acknowledge. That's why I always tell people, we can talk racism all we want. We still didn't let it stop you.
Correct.
Still didn't let it stop you.
I can't see anything stopping Cheryl. I don't care what state she in. I'm serious. I think Mississippi is in trouble, Cheryl. I don't think you're in trouble. I think Mississippi is in trouble.
Mississippi may be the last, but it'll get there one day. At least I have hope. Right? I have hope. I still have hope in America and places like Canada. I still do. I honestly can't think of any place else I'd still rather live. So.
Well, America's the only place I ever been, so I guess I just rather stay here than to leave and then figure out, oh crap, I did worse.
Well,
Mama say you jump out the frying pan into the fire. I think I'm gonna stay here.
I'm a little boy from Trinidad that's gotten to live in 2 of the greatest countries on this planet, the United States of America and Canada. I love my American roots. Love it. I love the fact that I grew up in the States. I love that I still have somewhat of an American mentality, although I choose to live in Canada. I love it. Wouldn't change a damn thing. So, warts and all. Warts and all. All right.
I adopted a saying. I saw on and actually this was a white girl that had this on her shirt, and I kind of told her, I said, look, I'm still in that one. It says grits, girl raised in the South. And that's exactly what I am, a grits.
Nice, nice.
In the spirit of Thanksgiving, I would like to share this poem to give pause for thanks. It's called Gratitude to my Heavenly Father. Every day is a day of joy. The angels' goodness and mercy visited me this morning. They didn't let me wake up on Jordan's bank. My gratitude is always to my Heavenly Father. I am in my right mind, mostly. I have limbs that work, mostly. I have food to eat, even if it's not my favorite. My gratitude is to my Heavenly Father. I owe all my gratitude to my Heavenly Father, who I am, what I have become, what I have overcome, and above all, what I will become. Thank you. End of piece. I want each of you to have a happy and blessed holiday. Cheryl, I want you to feel better. Rawle, will you close us with remarks and poems?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to thank you all, even Eddy, who is left, for being here, for being open, for sharing of your experiences openly, be vulnerable with us, sharing your anger. It's all welcomed here. It's needed. It's like building a house. You need all hands on deck, not just some. Because all our hands, all our experiences are a tremendous value. For us not to embrace it is trying to almost say, to deny that you even lived and you are worthy of the experiences that you want to share. And like our sister from Texas said, me not doing that is to some degree me not loving myself as well. And I do love all of you. It's not an easy subject to talk about, but we need to talk about it. We have enough nonsense on the airwaves about Black people. I am not one of these people that believe we are still struggling to the degree that the media sometimes wants us to believe. We have enough race baiters out there. Having said that, we still have serious issues. But I don't want to deal with the white man. I want to deal with us. Because the white man owes me nothing. I know the past. I don't fear the past. I don't loathe it. I have no shame or guilt of the past. Because everything that has happened in the past, my past and the collective past, has brought me here. And I like being here because if none of those things happen, I don't meet any of you. And like I said, maybe we're not cockroaches, but we're bats. They can't get rid of us. They tried. They cannot get rid of us. We are a strong, resilient, beautiful, majestic people. And I come from a long line of kings and queens and architects and thieves and slave owners. I come from a long line of everything, not just one thing. So when I call on the ancestors, I call on all of them. Trying to decide which poem to read. But in light of what we've been talking about, I'll read a poem that I think some of you have heard before. It's called Necessary for You, because I think it fits what we've been talking about. When I wrote this poem, it is for my Black brothers and sisters, but it's also for all my brothers and sisters. Because the invitation for me is for us to let go of race. If we want to get rid of racism, we have stopped believing in the construct of race. There is but one race on this planet made up of 31 different flavors. And who am I to doubt Yah, God's infinite wisdom, to paint us in different shading? Who am I? And I'm glad that we are raised differently, because then we can share of our upbringing, we can share of our food, our music, our dance, our words, our poetry, and learn from each other. Black, white, yellow, brown, I don't care. So that's my invitation. And tomorrow being Thanksgiving, I give great thanks for the ability to be able to connect with others, to listen, to share, so we can grow. So I'm going to end with this piece called Necessary for You. I've read this piece many times, but to me, this is one of the first times I feel it's really fitting in light of what we just experienced. From the fringe of my consciousness, I penned this piece in hopes of inspiring and awakening from the distraction of life's bullshit. Deception cast over wisdom as we live in a fear-induced construct of ignorance. I find myself caught up in a landslide of thoughts, fighting against the downward tumble of energies. The debris of our human frailty fills the airwaves, suffocating the good distilled that resides in our hearts. We rumble and seek to make sense of who we are in a world where freedom is written against the shadow of colonialism. lost in a vice grip of victimhood that guilts with shame, while others remain imprisoned in glory days, embracing a mindset that blankets the past with the morality of the present day. I am not a nigger or my nigger. James Baldwin said it was an invented word. It was necessary for you, not me. It reflected the fears that dwelled within, covering the false sense of superiority through conquest and greed. I am human, Black my walk. Not a condemnation of race, but a celebration of pigmentation. I simply speak my truth, unafraid of investigation as a free man of thought. I'm a descendant of kings and queens, architects of great civilization. My ancestors were the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I am the beautiful product of their legacy. Scattered to the four corners, disconnected and uninspired. Our history of a people hijacked, discredited, and whited out. Families, culture, and their sense of self rewired. Men were raped of their essence to be made boys. Women's virtue valued as concubine for amusement. Their spirit was under the constant barrage of hell's fire. Humanity denied, their bodies beaten, crushed beyond recognition. Pleasure derived from having their race beaten beyond the molecular makeup that binds all life. Their daily bread never enough to sustain life while being denied the ability to honor the temple. But their faith remained strong, praying on bloodstained knees, waiting for the judgment day, the rapture of the master's sin. I call upon the spirits of my ancestors. I stand up against injustices. To fuel a revolution where no pound of flesh is required as penance. I've learned to love within, to release the anger and hatred, to embrace the wisdom welted upon their backs, the virtues hidden in the cracked lines of their faces. In the chambers of my soul, I hear their voices echoing the call for liberty, tying us in a single garment of destiny. Their songs of freedom stayed constant as they carried the burden that was theirs to bear. And as their ashes return to enrich the earth, the dust of their bones stir in the winds while we wait for the awakening of our warrior soul. I issue a call to all my brothers and sisters. Free your heart, unshackled from the mental slavery. Know we are a mighty people. Before raising a hand against your own, know the backs that took the lash. Before speaking with contempt and disrespect, know the lives not lived. The time has come for us to take our rightful place, to recognize the value of all life, leaving behind the insanity of indifference while embracing a mindset that brings us together. Our lives have to matter to us. Our history must matter to us. It is no longer us versus us or even us versus them. Let us no longer be blind, deaf, and dumb as we embrace a mindset that casts out the insanity of indifference. Time to awaken and no longer be our own plantation masters. To be free within so we can live free together. Let us build anew, valuing all life as we fulfill the prophecy of those who came before us. The time has come to get right with our history so we are not stuck in its hypocrisy. Heart to heart, let us walk with grace and dignity and deliver on the promise of getting to the mountaintop. We are the fulfillment of prophecy that Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, Langston Hughes, Jonathan Daniels, Viola Desmond, Fannie Lou Hammer, Claudette Colvin, Mamie Elizabeth Till, Daisy Bates, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy, Shirley Chisholm, Desmond Tutu, Stephen Biko, Nelson Mandela, and Robert Woodson spoke of. It is said that the truth shall set us free, but only if one is open to the truth that binds us. We all walk the same earth, breathe the same air, drink the same water. We all come from woman, and death will visit us all. Let us not be colorblind, but be human-sided. End of piece. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an honor to share this time with you. It's been an honor to hear your thoughts, to feel a bit of your heart. I'm grateful. I'm so grateful that we as poets can come together to talk and to share and to grow and to learn. Let's find ways to pass this on, not just with ourselves, but with the next generations, and to give them hope and to remind them of the stock that they come from, because we are a mighty people. We are a mighty people. I love you all very much. Until the next episode, which is, I believe, on December 30th, and we'll get to dive into Jordans and books and see where that takes us. I hope you'll spread the word and pass this video out to those in your circle. I'd love to see more brothers and sisters at the next one. But even if they only can watch it, please share it. Let them know I'll process this and try to have it up by the weekend. It's been an enlightened series, and we still have 2 more to go. I know this has definitely prompted me to do more. And I'm not big on Black History Month, but for some reason, this Black History Month coming, I'm actually looking forward to it, because I think Miss Anjie and I got some interesting things to bring to the masses in regards to I am Black and I am proud. Like I said in my poem, Black is my walk, not a condemnation of race, but a celebration of pigmentation. I love you all. Have a blessed night and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, brother. Good night. Thank y'all.
Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Thanks for coming, sister.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank y'all. Good
I'll be
night.
waiting for my sweet potato pie.
All right now. I got you. All right now.
If I had it, I'd be sitting there watching Detroit and Chicago tomorrow. So,
Now you be licking your fingers by now.
hell, well, I don't even know if I would make it till tomorrow. So, you guys said, Chyrel, feel better, sister. Feel better.
Good night,
All
y'all.
right, guys.
Good night.
Peace.
Okay.
Thank you, Miss Anjie.
Have a good one.